Now, to introduce our speaker, it's my honor to present one of the founders of the World Affairs Council of Greater Houston and a man instrumental in the many accomplishments and successes of the World Affairs Council of Greater Houston, Mr. Alan Crane. Alan has advised multinational companies in legal and business matters throughout the world for more than 35 years. He is also an independent arbitrator with over 30 years' experience in both domestic and international arbitrations, and was general counsel of 3 Fortune 500 multinationals, including senior vice president and chief legal officer of Baker Hughes. He is a regular lecturer at the Jones School at Rice University, a member of the Council on Foreign Relations, president of the Houston Committee on Foreign Relations, vice chairman of the Institute for Transnational Arbitration, and sits on the boards of the American Arbitration Association, National Association of Corporate Directors, Texas Tri-Cities Region, the Asia Society Texas Center, and the World Affairs Council of Greater Houston. Please welcome my friend, Alan Crane. Alan, welcome.
Thank you very much, Marianne. It's a great honor tonight to have the opportunity to speak, to introduce former Speaker of the House of Representatives, John Boehner. I'm actually out of the country, but Marianne was kind enough to invite me, and I said I would get up at any hour to have this honor. He doesn't need an introduction to the members of the World Affairs Council or a sophisticated group, but he deserves an introduction, and one even longer than I'll give him because you want to hear from him and not just about him. We all know he was Speaker of the House of the United States House of Representatives, from January 2011 through October 2015. And he's the core of republicanism to me. He's a small family business member, came from a small family business, formed his own small business, and he came to the United States Congress in October 2015, or he left the United States Congress in October 2015, and he'd been there about 25 years, serving our country and also diligently serving the peoples of Ohio's 8th Congressional District. And throughout that entire time, he fought for classic Republican values: smaller, less costly, and more accountable federal government. He knows the problems of families. He was the second oldest of 12 brothers and sisters. He had to work to go to college, work his way through college, through Xavier University, where he met his wife, and they've been married for over 40 years. They started a family business together, and they still live in the home where they raised their 2 daughters. His reputation as a reformer in the Republican Party and in Congress is well known throughout our country, and his work with then Speaker Newt Gingrich back in 1994 with the Contract of America is very famous history in our nation and political history. He served in many capacities in the House, the chairman of the House Committee on Education and Workforce. He wrote state legislation to expand school choice, to strengthen America's pension system, to reform the federal education bureaucracy, and to demand true results for students and parents. He was elected as the House Majority Leader in 2006 and chosen to become House Republican Leader later that year. And it was on January 5th, 2011, that John Boehner took the gavel as Speaker of the House following the historic 2010 election, which he helped congressional Republicans pick up 63 seats in the House. For the last few years, he's been at Squire Patton Boggs, where he's a senior strategic advisor to all the clients, both U.S. and abroad, and he focuses on global business development. I could go on for the entire time we have tonight about John Boehner, but let me turn it back over to Ronan and to Speaker Boehner. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alan, and thank you, Marianne. And Speaker Boehner, it's truly an honor and a privilege for the council to host you. Very good of you to do this. I know you're very busy, if nothing else, because the book is so popular. I just want to show it again and let the audience know. Again, like we mentioned, Speaker Boehner is kindly going to have a signed copy for everyone, so give it about 2 weeks to get delivered. And if you want to order another copy, we will have links to that on our website. And I wanted to say all of you will definitely learn a lot from his book. I've read a lot of these memoirs from Washington, but this one is definitely probably one of the most fun, the most entertaining, and probably one of the most honest and direct. So I think a lot of ways maybe you'll learn the most, but also a lot of great lessons in here, great messages. And congratulations, Speaker Boehner. Well, this book just recently is the #1 nonfiction book in the United States on the New York Times bestseller list. It might have been a while since the New York Times called you #1 in much of anything. But I just want to say thank you for it. And Alan mentioned a lot of your kind of incredible, great American success story. You mentioned 1 of 12 kids, growing up in a small house with just 2 bedrooms, and your parents even, sharing a pull-out sofa couch. But one of the places you mentioned outside of your house where you maybe learned the most and shaped you the most was your family's tavern or restaurant or bar, however people might like to call it. You note that at age 8, you woke up with your older brother at 4:45 in the morning and quietly left the house with your dad to make sure that everything was open at the tavern for the first customers to come at 5:30. And I think one of the things that I appreciate the most from that is you said one of the most important things you learned, even at a young age, was to treat everybody with respect. Could you maybe talk a bit about, I don't want to take all of it away because people enjoy reading the book, but what were some of those lessons you learned at the tavern from your family that really shaped you before you got to Congress?
Well, when you grew up let me say, Ronan, thank you for your nice comments, and Alan, and to all of you who are tuning in tonight, thank you. Listen, growing up in a big family, you learn an awful lot. How to get along with each other, how to get things done together. My dad, my uncles owned a bar, and then my grandfather started right around the end of Prohibition, maybe right before Prohibition or after, I don't know. It was a little murky. But you grew up in a bar, I mopped floors, did dishes, waited tables, washed windows. I did it all over the years. And you learn a few things. One, you learn the art of being able to disagree without being disagreeable. That drunks in me sitting there at the end of the bar all night. I'm tending the bar. I don't want to have to fight with a guy, but I sure as hell don't agree with him. And so you learn this art of being able to disagree without being disagreeable. Second lesson you learn growing up in a bar is you have to learn to deal with every jackass that walks in the door. They're all. So by the time I became speaker, trust me, all these lessons I learned growing up were the lessons I needed to help me be the Speaker of the House.
And moving on, the book, you get a lot more of the details of it, but you have a great story of how you yourself joined Congress. You served for 25 years, I believe, for almost 5 years as Speaker of the House. I believe the second longest Republican serving Speaker of the House since the days of the Great Depression and FDR. But when you first got there, some people might say, well, Speaker Boehner, what you were doing as a young freshman congressman is just like some of these new people from the far right or the far left trying to throw out bombs and be disruptive. But in reality, what you were doing was very different. You were a reformer, and you weren't just doing things to make headlines. You were saying this is something wrong that needs to be fixed, whether it be the House Bank or the House Post Office or any other forms of kind of abuse and excess. Can you maybe talk about when you first got to Congress, your role in the Gang of Seven, and how it was that you kind of meshed together with Gingrich and the kind of future leadership of the House?
Well, after I got elected to Congress, you have to go fill all the paperwork out. And when it came to your pay, they made it clear you had to have an account at the House Bank. Well, I didn't need another bank account. I just wanted it wired to my account in Ohio. I mean, it was 1990, for God's sakes. I mean, they actually could wire your pay. No. If you want to get paid, you have to have an account at the House Bank. So after fighting with them for a couple of weeks, it became clear I wasn't going to get paid unless I had an account. And so fast forward about 9 months, I'm reading USA Today, the big sleuth that I am. And I'm reading page 6, bottom left-hand corner. And it starts talking about the General Accounting Office did their annual audit of the House Bank and found that members of Congress had bounced 8,226 checks in 1990. And I thought, well, hell, there's only 435 of us. There's something wrong here. So I started asking a few questions, and people just would turn white. Well, I grew up in a bar. I can smell nonsense a mile away. And so finally, nobody would tell us anything. And we tried to bring a resolution to the floor of the House, and the Speaker Tom Foley came off the dais and down into the well. Bob Michael, the Republican leader, Dick Gephardt, the majority leader on the Democrat side. And the three of them essentially said the same thing. We didn't do anything wrong, and we won't do it again. Well, I was just outraged. They tabled our resolution, but I was hell-bent to get to the bottom of what's going on here. This bank had been around for 168 years. And so it ended up 7 freshman Republicans. We had about as much clout as the dust on the top of my shoes. And so we split up responsibilities. I did the print press. One guy did radio. One guy did the TV people. And 4 days later, the House Bank was closed. We turned the heat up on the institution. It wasn't aimed at Democrats or Republicans. It was aimed at, let's clean up this mess we have here. And then they wanted to blame it after 6 months on the top 24 check bouncers. And we said, no, the American people have a right to see all of this. And so all of it finally got disclosed. And out of all this, the phone kept ringing. And we had problems in the House post office. We had problems in the House restaurant system. Members not paying their bills. So we brought it all out to light in an effort to clean up the institution and make it better. But boy, our colleagues, my colleagues, did not like it at all.
And then I suppose, Alan touched upon it in your introduction. One of the most famous, attorneys of the House in modern American history. Can you discuss, the midterm election, 1994, the Contract with America that you all devised, the kind of, even as a young congressman at the time, the first time Republicans had controlled the House in decades. What was it in particular, you think, that really helped you connect to the American people and make such a big difference and cause such a landslide victory?
Well, Republicans had been in the minority for 36 years when I got there. And one of the things I noticed in 1991, 1992, is that there really wasn't a significant effort to take the majority because no Republicans had ever served in the majority and never believed they could serve in the majority. And so I have to say that our biggest challenge was convincing our fellow colleagues that we actually could win. We could actually be the chairman. We could actually run the place. You thought that we were selling snake oil. Some of my colleagues will look at me like, well, you're out of your mind. You're crazy. But I was a Gingrich advocate, acolyte, if you will, early on. And Newt was about to become the next Republican leader. And he had this idea of doing the Contract with America. Here are the 10 things we'll vote on in the Congress if you elect us as the majority. Now, I'm not sure that it was the key to winning, but in fact, we did win a majority in the Congress for the first time in 40 years in 1994. We didn't even know, we had no clue how to run a place. None of us had ever been in the majority. We didn't even know where these rooms were. We had the architect of the Capitol have to take us around the Capitol and show us rooms that none of us had ever seen. It was really rather, it was overwhelming at first. And then we had promised we would have these 10 bills voted on in the first 100 days, which was another monumental feat. But we had our fits and starts, but we got through all of this and held the majority, for the next, really actually about 12 years.
And I think a lot of Americans will remember perhaps it was a great example of divided government working well. A Democratic president, but the Republican Party guys in control in Congress, but is also a time of I think relative stability and success and prosperity in the United States. Not to mention the fact one of the few times in modern history we had an actual budget surplus.
And we did. We actually did. And Bill Clinton. We had our ups and downs with President Clinton. But at the end of the day, Bill Clinton, who I think is the best politician I've ever met. I mean, this guy could sell ice to Eskimos. But we ended up having a very good relationship with the White House and actually get an awful lot of things done in a bipartisan way. To the point where Bill Clinton called me several days ago to tell me how much he enjoyed my book. Kind of a son of George W. Bush, by the way. But it was both of them mentioned in the book. But it was, for me, it was kind of a highlight of the last several weeks, having two presidents call me and say, "Good job." You know, for a guy who grew up with not much, in my book, I think I outlined that I've met 10 presidents. I mean, for God's sake, how many people in America have met 10 presidents? And frankly, most of them I had a pretty good relationship with, and a pretty close relationship with.
Yeah, and I mean, I think people will really enjoy your impressions and memories, and even continuing friendships with a certain number of presidents, as you mentioned, George Bush or even Clinton. You may not watch yourself playing golf with them, but you know, I do think one thing that's at the time when you were elected in you took the control of the House in '94. You and your leadership, you know, were heralded, especially by conservative media, whether you Rush Limbaugh, Fox News, for your great successes, for what you have done. You know, somewhat ironic that I don't think you changed. You were the same person, but by the time you became speaker, all those same voices were kind of ardently against you. And in some ways, I think part of it was that, as you mentioned in the book, you did not go to Congress to create chaos or make headlines. You went to Congress to get things done. You mentioned, you know, compromise doesn't have to be a bad word. You know, maybe you could talk about the difference between compromise and common ground, or even, you know, you mentioned, you know, the most famous Republican for you know, since Lincoln, obviously, you know, Reagan, I think, said, you know, the diehard conservatives, you know, could say, I should jump off a cliff if I don't get everything I asked for, but if I get 70 to 80%, then that's a success, and I'll work on the rest in the future. Can you talk about the realities and the real world of governing if you actually want to accomplish something?
Yeah, well, they're a lot different than what you would see on the news on any channel on TV these days. You know, people in the press want to talk about compromise. Well, I never expected President Obama to compromise who he was, and I didn't think he was expecting me to compromise who I was. The question was, what can we agree on? Where's the common ground? You know, as far left as he was, as far right, I'm conservative, but I'm not crazy. You know, the American people sent us there to get things done on behalf of the country. Now, I went out of my way to develop a relationship with Barack Obama, someone who I have absolutely nothing in common with. We come from different parts of the country. We have different backgrounds, different personalities. But to do my job as Speaker of the House, I felt like I had a relationship with him, and I did, and I still do. And so we would find common ground. It would take a little while sometimes. We went through our ups and downs, but on behalf of the country, we found some common ground. Listen, what happened in the media, talk radio, cable TV, you know, 24/7 became 24/7 all politics. They don't do much news anymore. It's all politics. And then the internet comes along, and we've got every social media platform known to man. And some of these talk radio guys, in an effort to get more of an audience away from one of their competitors, started doing what I call crazy right. I mean, outrageous stuff. How about this? Barack Obama is a Kenyan-born Muslim. He was not born in the United States. I had answered this question, I can't even tell you how many times. But one morning on a Sunday morning news show, I said, when asked this question, I said, listen, the state of Hawaii produced a birth certificate for Barack Hussein Obama and said he was born in Hawaii. That's good enough for me. Oh my God, the next day, you'd have thought that I would have said the most outrageous thing in the world. I mean, I got crucified by talk radio and some on the cable news channels because I just said it the way it was. And this all started around 2010, 2011, what I will call a crazy right. These people just started trying to outdo one another, trying to outright one another, trying to out crazy one another. And you know, when they start that, there are people out in America who listen to them, who believe this stuff, Then you got some members of Congress who begin to follow along. I call them the knuckleheads. These guys wanted chaos. They didn't want to govern. They wanted chaos. They're anarchists. And, that's not what I was. That's not what I wanted. And on any given day, I'd have 200, 210 Republican votes, good members. But I'd have 2 or 3 dozen of these knuckleheads. And, if you don't have 218, you have nothing. That's a majority. And so I would go to them and say, listen, why don't we work together and work something out here? Oh, no. It's either all our way or no way. Well, I'm sorry, but that's not the way the world works. I said, listen, I'm going to tell you this. You don't work with me, I'm going to go work with Pelosi and we'll get this done. Which is guaranteed that you're going to get less of what you want and more of what you don't want. No, go ahead. We don't want to talk to you. It's just craziness. That's fine if you're sitting around a bar having a beer, being a knucklehead, but my God, you're in Congress. You're there to do something. It was an interesting time in Congress, and that's why one of my chapters is entitled "Mayor of Crazy Town."
Yes, I appreciated the title, but I also felt that sadly it was not too much hyperbole. Related to the media, you discuss at various points in the book. Obviously, people can talk about conservative talk radio or Fox News, especially in recent years. MSNBC and CNN, sadly, aren't much better. It's just whatever opinions they want to put on for 3 hours straight every night from the left or from the right. But were you surprised, I suppose, by the power that the media has started to I suppose, have in politics? You mentioned an early chapter about Michelle Bachmann, even though she was a young congresswoman who was only there just a few years, coming to you and asking to be put on the most important committee in Congress, the Ways and Means Committee, which is usually something you earn over many years of Congress and learning your way. But she said, well, if you don't do this, I'm going to go straight to Rush Limbaugh and Hannity, and you're going to hear about it on the news. I mean,
she didn't quite say that. Yeah. But I knew exactly what was going on. There's a chapter in my book talking about power. Now, I used to laugh at this whole concept of power. And I used to watch people get an ounce of power and turned into complete jackasses. Now, and I never, while I had what people would call a powerful position, the only power I was interested in is in what I could do to make our country better. It's not rocket science, but boy, oh boy, in Washington, there are a lot of people running around looking for power. Now, this lady came from Minneapolis. She became a media darling with the far right, the knucklehead caucus, and she wanted to be on the Ways and Means Committee. Well, that was never going to happen because the steering committee makes its decision, and I don't really control it. And there was no way they were ever going to put her on the Ways and Means Committee. But if she did get on the Ways and Means Committee, she was going to trash me every single night on Hannity. Pick one of them. I was going to have my ass handed to me. And so I decided there is one committee I control all of the appointments, and that's to the Intelligence Committee, which is a highly sought after committee. Mike Rogers was going to be the new chairman, and I convinced her that was a better place for her to go. Well, she accepted. The threat was gone. She let go of my testicles, and I could breathe again. And so, but Mike Rogers, the chairman of the Intelligence Committee, was ready to kill me. I mean, one of my good friends, I stuck him with this, and he almost knocked me down in my office. He actually turned out to be a pretty good member of the Intelligence Committee. And so it all worked out, but you learn pretty quickly that even though you're the Speaker of the House, doesn't mean you have all the power.
And I think another example of the power and the influence of the media and was you were friends with Roger Ailes, who obviously, the head of Fox News and running Fox News, and you went to him personally and said, hey, if we really want to achieve our conservative goals and get anything passed in Congress, you need to tone it down. We can't keep having these crazies coming to make the rest of the Republicans look bad, in essence. Or even another example I thought was really interesting was you mentioned, Senator Harry Reid purposely saying things, whether they're true or not, knowing that they would stir up the crazy members in your party, and that would start the whole cycle again. I mean, did it surprise you that power of influence from the media?
No. Listen, I learned pretty quickly the power of TV. It's and talk radio. It's a very powerful medium that I've been gone 5.5 years. People see me and now they go, hey, I think I should know you. You look familiar. But after 2 weeks of doing all this media, we're beyond that now. But they're very powerful. And what I found out with talking to my friend Roger Ailes is that hell, he was just as nutty as, maybe nuttier than most of my members who I thought were nutty. I was in an office one Monday morning trying to convince him that they shouldn't keep bringing members on TV, really crazy people. I'll try to avoid names, but they would bring some crazy people on, some near Houston, Texas. And it's just, people would just say nutty things that had nothing to do with reality. And I don't know, all of a sudden Roger Ailes starts talking about this panic room that he has in his house and how Barack Obama has these people following him. And oh my God, I thought this guy read too many spy novels over the weekend or something. It was bizarre. I walked out of Fox News headquarters, shaking my head, wondering what in the hell has happened to the world.
And again, it turned to maybe the probably second most impressive Republican takeover in recent years, midterms of 2010, after which, and because of which, your leadership became Speaker of the House. And you mentioned in the book that maybe it's a good example of how refusing to have any bipartisan support or trying to force through a bill just because you control the House, the Senate, and the presidency can backfire on you. Particularly, Obama maybe not looking for compromise on certain votes early on in his presidency, it was Obamacare or elsewhere. Can you talk about, I suppose, what it was that you and the rest of the leadership did to craft that takeover again in 2010?
Well, Barack Obama got elected in 2008 as our president. I was the minority leader. Nancy Pelosi became speaker. And they tried to shove through everything humanly possible. They had 60 votes in the Senate. They had a big majority in the House. And, it was Obamacare. It was Dodd-Frank, the financial reform bill, cap and trade regarding climate change. Some policies that at the time were way, way, way beyond where the American people were. And our members, based on principle, voted against these things. It wasn't about Barack Obama or Nancy Pelosi or anything else. These are things that we just don't believe in. And so it became pretty clear by 2010 that the American people were not happy with what the Democrats were doing. And out of that effort in 2009 and early 2010, this Tea Party movement began. And we ended up with a bunch of Tea Party candidates on the ballot in 2010. A lot of them won in 2010. Most of them became good Republican members, and some of them became knuckleheads. Just came there to create chaos and just blow up the institution with some idea they were going to remake it.
And obviously, you and Obama had a unique relationship. Perhaps like Tip O'Neill and Reagan. You guys might not have gone out to dinner as much with each other, but obviously a lot of efforts there in negotiations. Can you maybe talk about his negotiation style, and I suppose maybe one or two of your kind of the successes you feel most proud of from that time, and maybe one or two of the kind of disappointments of what you could not get achieved?
Well, I'll try to avoid the sausage making because, frankly, it was very painful. But at the end of the day, we cut the deficit 5 years in a row. I'm the Republican Speaker, Harry Reid, Democrats, the Senate Majority Leader, and Barack Obama is president. It's still hard to believe that we accomplished that, but we did. And there are a number of other things we did in terms of strengthening programs. But it all had to be done on a bipartisan basis or nothing was going to happen. Now, I would like to have done a bigger transformation of our fiscal mess that we have, but the president walked away from the deal. I would like to have found an overhaul of our immigration policies because our entire system is a mess and needs to be updated, needs to be fixed, but we never got there. But listen, at the end of the day, politics is about the art of the possible. It's not about the art of the impossible. It's easy to go out there and talk about a bunch of impossible things, but trying to figure out what's doable. Where is the common ground? And I'm no different today than when I was in office. I'm the same jackass. Actually, my greatest success is that I walked out of Congress after 25 years, pretty much the same jackass that walked in.
Thank you, Speaker. And maybe turning to kind of the state of American politics, as they are now. You mentioned in the book that, say, whether you're a moderate Democrat or a moderate Republican, your realities are very different to, say, the far right Republican might get elected from northern Georgia, or the far left Democrat might get elected from a borough of New York. In that neither is probably going to face a realistic challenger from the other side, so they can kind of, in essence, just be as crazy as they want to be. Do you think primaries, and it's become a verb to get primaried, especially for a lot of regular, traditional, moderate Republicans, they say you're going to be primaried. I'm going to, send someone after you who's, on the fringes, and they're going to run against you and lose. Do you think perhaps we should consider other possibilities? I know people talk about systems where we have a blanket or an open primary where everybody runs, and regardless of party, the top two vote getters are the people put on a ballot in November. Do you think we need something different with our primary system?
There are a couple of states who've tried that, but it really it hasn't moderated anything. Here's the problem. When you look at most congressional districts in America, they tend to be heavily Democrat or heavily Republican. But who shows up to vote in these primaries? In a Democrat district, it's the left of the left. In a Republican district, it's the right of the right. What we really need is more traditional Democrats and traditional Republicans, normal people, to show up and vote in these primaries. And guess what? We'll end up with candidates that aren't quite as crazy. And I know this probably isn't the prescription people want to hear, but we need people to show up in primaries to help elect people who will actually go there and work to get something done. Not go there to create chaos, create a name for themselves, raise a bunch of money, and make a bunch of noise. I could use examples, but I'm holding my tongue.
So I suppose keep the system, but try and encourage just regular Americans to get out and vote in the actual primaries.
In the primaries.
Yeah. All right, and I just want to remind our audience, if you want to submit a question, you can type them into the Q&A section, and we'll get to those in a little bit with Speaker Boehner. Just you discussed some of it in the book with regards to what's happened in recent years, the Republican Party, if and how it's changed. What would you say to, kind of someone who's been a Republican for their whole life, or maybe even an independent who would vote depending on the candidate, thought they're a good person, but someone who traditionally values, smaller government, fiscal responsibility, strong military that supports its alliances, free trade. Those people, where are they now? I mean, Reagan, said, I think in the 60s, long before he became president, I didn't leave the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party left me. What do you say to those people who feel like if the future of the Republican Party is led by one man, it's a populist and a nativist party, what do I do? Where do I go?
Well, I think Republicans just have to act like Republicans. We've got principles that you just outlined that have held us together as a party for 160 years. And all we have to do is to focus in on the principles of what it means to be a Republican. And if you don't agree with that, fine, you vote for the Democrats. This is not about personalities. It's not about a cult. We're a party of principles. Let's just start acting like Republicans. Let's go out there and talk about our principles and how they apply to every American there is. And if we do that, well, I think we're going to be fine.
And I want to just after this one, get to the audience questions. But just in case anybody's worried about our discussion, your book is a hopeful book. You're an optimistic person. You're someone, I think, who's always worked hard in your life, but always thought good things are possible. What would you say to people about your opinions and I suppose perspectives for the U.S. in the next few years and what we can do and maybe should do?
Hey, listen, I used to tell my colleagues every day what my parents taught me and what I try to teach my daughters. If you do the right things for the right reasons, the right things will probably happen. Just don't worry about it. And, listen, I'm a big believer in America. We're the most resilient people God ever put on earth. And we've made our share of mistakes over and over. But you know what? Eventually we figure it out. And there's no more open, transparent society in the history of the world. And so, we've had our challenges. We got them now. But we'll figure it out. We always figure it out. Winston Churchill, on the eve of the U.S. entering World War II, actually before we entered, was on the floor of the House of Commons. And he said, those Americans, they'll make every mistake known to man until they get it right. And we'll get it right. We're going through a rough period in American history, but we're a great country because we're open, and because we're free, and because we're transparent.
All right, and just I'm going to pick up on audience questions related. This is related to what we just discussed a moment ago. Stephanie asks, how can we get moderate candidates to run? It's very frustrating to only have kind of extremist candidates in the primaries.
Yeah, well, given the nature of American politics, I don't know how anybody would decide to put their name on the ballot. Somebody tried to suggest to me on a Sunday morning news show, would you run for office again? And I said, well, I'd rather set myself on fire than to run for office again. But I've been around this for 40 years. It's a little different, but they're out there. There are good people out there. We got to find them. We've got to support them, and they're out there. Every district in America, they're out there. They might need a little encouragement, need a little financial support, but they're out there. Just help them.
All right. And Rob asks, how can you moderate or have moderate, I suppose, candidates with extreme gerrymandering?
Well, listen, this whole gerrymandering question, I'm sorry, but I chuckle at it. Democrats had the pencil by and large from the 1930s until the 1990s. And they drew these congressional districts to favor their candidate. Well, starting in 1992, Republicans started to have a piece of the pencil and a little bigger piece in 2001. And, by the time we got to 2011, we pretty well controlled the pencil. Well, Democrats don't like it. And so they want to claim that gerrymandering is bad for the country. It's led to all this nonsense. I'm sorry. I think it has nothing to do with it. It's a liberal talking point. And, the Democrats want to change how we draw lines. Why? Because they can't elect state legislators. Well, sorry, get over it. We earn the pencil. We have the pencil. And when you earn it back, you earn it back.
But I suppose on that, as you mentioned, for many years, Democrats were powerhouse, all across the country, especially in the years after FDR. The gerrymandering going on there probably wasn't helpful. If it's happening the other way around, in the bigger picture, is that good for the country?
Turnabout's fair play.
Okay. Wendy asks, could you pick a Republican candidate for 2024? And if so, who would you like it to be?
Listen, we're going to have a lot of good people running. I don't know who all they are. I'm starting to get the idea of my friend Kristi Noem, the governor of South Dakota. She's acting like she might be interested in this. She'd be a great candidate. But there's going to be a dozen people running. Who knows? They're 3 years away. Good luck to all of them.
And I suppose you would would you be unlikely to endorse someone, just kind of let them settle the field on their own?
For God's sakes, no, it would hurt them.
Okay. Doug asked, what's the outlook for the GOP after Trump?
Well, I think Republicans have a real chance of winning the majority in the House in 2022. And the picture is not as clear in the Senate, but Republicans are going to pick up 7 to 10 seats as a result of redistricting. States up north losing seats like Ohio, New York, Pennsylvania, Michigan, and states like Texas, Florida, Arizona gaining seats. And so that generally would favor Republicans. And so I think, and then secondly, once you get a president of one party, the first midterm election, his party loses a ton of seats, on average 28 seats. So you put those two together, and it's almost impossible for Democrats to hold on to the majority in 2022. I'll add to that. The war within the Democrat Party that's been kind of simmering just below the surface is going to break out into open warfare here pretty soon.
I guess just various people ask similar questions. In the book, regarding Trump, you point his good qualities. You know, you're happy what he did with regards to supporting the military, bringing conservative justice to the court, but you're very critical of the fact that his completely just unrelenting obsession with this falsehood of the election being rigged and stolen is bad for the party. It's bad for the country, and not only for Republicans. You note that that's probably why you lost the Senate, because as of that, they won both Senate elections, special elections in Georgia. And you also, I think, largely put the blame on him for the Capitol riot and insurrection. What do you see as his role and influence over the party in the years to come?
Well, listen, he's retired. He's got nothing to do except muck around in the Republican Party. I voted for Donald Trump. He and I have been friends for a long time. One of the few people he knew in Washington before he ended up there. And I watched everything that happened after the election for 2 months. All this noise about the election being stolen, and I kept looking for the evidence. Where are the facts? I've been around elections for 40 years, so I know something about elections and the problems that happen in elections. And no facts. No facts. And I think he riled up an awful lot of Americans November and December of last year. And, they showed up at the Capitol. Now, I do think that there were probably 3 or 4 anarchist groups that took advantage of a lot of Trump supporters and led this mob action at the Capitol. But there's no way around the fact that some of the blame lays right at his feet. And so, that's why I've been urging Republicans to go back to the principles of the Republican Party. Party of free and fair trade, party of fiscal responsibility. Things that Republicans believe in, for God's sakes, that have served us well for 160 years, and they will serve us well in the future if we'll just go back to the principles of what it means to be a Republican.
And Speaker, would you be able to stay maybe 5 or 10 minutes past just to get some of these questions?
Sure.
Okay, thanks. And and I know you're doing a lot. You're busy, especially with the book. Like I mentioned, being #1 in the country. I know if you have to step off for something else, I definitely understand.
No. I'm good. Listen, I'm the most low maintenance guy you've ever met in your life.
That was one thing I definitely enjoyed that in the book. There are two different questions related to the Supreme Court. I suppose Bill asked, do you see Democrats changing the Supreme Court? How could we avoid that politicization? And someone else asked a similar question. Kelly asked, what is the real possibilities of Democrats packing the court? She says FDR wasn't successful, but could that be different now?
All right. The answer is real simple. No chance. They can talk about it all they want. The votes are not there in the House or the Senate to pack the court. The court itself and liberal members of the court have made it clear that this would be an awful thing to do. And it would. It's nothing more than, frankly, changing the rules. But the votes aren't there for it to happen. Don't worry about it. It's not going to happen.
Related to that, obviously, you weren't, it wasn't Ms. McConnell's choice to push it through, but I suppose a lot of that bitterness and kind of feeling for, turnabout's fair play is because with about 10 and a half months left before the election, Obama tried to fill a vacancy with Merrick Garland, but McConnell refused to even bring it before the Senate. Even if he had the ability and the technical ability to do that, do you think it was the right thing?
Pure politics. It's not pretty. People should never watch two things happen: sausage being made or laws being made. And Mitch McConnell was doing what he could do to try to keep a conservative majority on the court. But it's pure politics. There's no other way to describe it. And people can not agree. People can make noise about it. But McConnell had the cards in his hand, and he played them the way he wanted to play them.
Two questions, somewhat related to each other about anything that might change. But Doug asks, what's your impression on the idea of term limits for Congress or just in general? And Peter asks, is fiscal responsibility something that even divides the parties anymore, or have Republicans gotten as bad about spending as Democrats?
Yeah, fiscal responsibility has kind of gone down the drain because, it's not easy to control spending, cut spending. Nobody wants to do it because if you're in politics, the more you spend, usually the better your constituents are and the country is. But at some point, somebody's got to pay the bills. You can't do this. You can't spend more than what you bring in at home for very long. You can't do it if you run a business, and your government can't do it either. And we're spending money today that our kids, our grandkids, and our great-grandkids are going to get to pay the bill. This is so unfair. That's why for 25 years I was in Congress, there's probably not a bigger deficit hawk than I was. But back to the first question. The first question was about
term limits.
Oh, term limits. Dumbest thing I've ever seen. I'll just use an example we have in Ohio. In 1992, they put term limits in on members of the state legislature. And so you can serve 8 years in the House and 8 years in the Senate. You can go back and forth. But what do we got? We got members of the General Assembly in Ohio who don't even know where the bathroom is. And some of them are getting elected speaker in their second term. All the staff, all the administration, all the lobbyists know where all the bodies are buried. They know all the history. And here the members don't know anything. I don't think it's served Ohio well. And it's not going to happen in Congress. So people can talk about it, but it's not a good policy. We have term limits. They're called elections. Throw the shitheads out.
And the only place where I suppose at the highest level we do have term limits, obviously until FDR, it was kind of a gentleman's agreement that you'd only serve 2 terms. But since then, obviously that changed. Do you think a 2-term limit is still good for the presidency?
Yeah, I think on the presidency it served them well. Listen, being president is the toughest job in the world. I've been close to a lot of presidents, but George W. Bush and I are like 2 peas out of the same pot. We're very close. And I watched him go through this every single day for 8 years. It was brutal. But I watched George W. Bush do what he thought was in the country's best interest every single day, regardless of the political consequences. And that job takes a toll on you. And frankly, we're doing whoever gets elected president a favor by having a 2-term limit.
And related to the practice of the running of the House itself, Brandon asked 2 related questions. What does former Speaker Boehner think about the continued use of proxy voting in the House? Just for people who may not know, that the ability to vote even if you're not present. And what about restriction on the minority's use of the motion to recommit?
Well, proxy voting we never had in the history of Congress until COVID came along. And clearly something had to happen. And proxy voting went into effect. But, all the members have been vaccinated who wanted to be vaccinated. I think it's time to end proxy voting. But apparently it's not finished yet. But it's gonna come to an end here pretty soon. When it comes to the motion to recommit, it's the one chance the minority has to speak up and to have a bit of power. And Democrats are trying to restrict the Republicans' ability to use motions to recommit. But I think it's silly myself. I was a big believer when I was Speaker in protecting the rights of the minority. My God, in the House, because we have 435 members, there are a lot of rules, and the majority rules. And so protecting the few rights the minority has, I thought was fair and equitable. And here the Democrats are; they got the majority, but the motion to recommit gives them some fits. Well, get over it, all right? And so I think they ought to restore the motion to recommit to its historical purpose.
Okay, and obviously this is outside of your chamber, but a question a lot of Americans wonder about. Rita and Joel asked, should the filibuster be ended? And maybe just briefly for some people understand what the filibuster is talking about and the need for a majority of 60 in the Senate.
So the Senate for the last 100 plus years has had this 60 vote threshold to move anything. And then Harry Reid changed that threshold for confirmations to the federal bench, not the Supreme Court, federal bench, and for confirmations. And then McConnell became the majority leader, and Trump was president. McConnell changed the threshold to 50 votes, a majority, for the Supreme Court. But there's still a 60 vote threshold for virtually everything that comes to the floor of the House that doesn't involve confirmations or federal judges. Now, what we call the legislative filibuster, which frankly has served America well. It was never intended that the House would look like the Senate, or in this case, the Senate would look like the House. And in the House, the majority is the majority. But the Senate was supposed to be the saucer under the hot cup of coffee of the House. The House is rambunctious. We got a lot of members. It's where people's voices are heard. The Senate's supposed to be more deliberative. And if you got rid of the legislative filibuster in the Senate, it's going to look just like the House. And so that's my opinion on the filibuster. Secondly, the votes are not there to end the legislative filibuster. And it's not just Joe Manchin and the 2 Democrat senators from Arizona. There are other Democrats, Dianne Feinstein as an example. I would suspect several other very senior Democrats who understand that the Democrats aren't going to have the majority in the Senate forever. And the legislative filibuster has saved America from a lot of really bad laws when you had all Democrats in charge and all Republicans in charge.
And just 3 more quick questions, if you don't mind. There are others, but just for the sake of time, I don't want to keep you too long. Someone else asked, do you think President Biden will be able to work with Republicans? Do you think he should say or do, or what should he say or do to have bipartisan support?
Well, remember, bipartisanship starts at the beginning of the process, not at the end of the process. And I've watched Joe. Listen, I've known Joe Biden for 30 years. Great guy, friend of mine, traditional Democrat. He and I don't think there's anything he and I couldn't agree on and resolve. But since he's been sworn into office, he and his staff have kind of leaned to the left, leaned to the left, leaned to the left, trying to hold the Democrat Party together. The Democrat Party's got the same factions that the Republican Party has. You got traditional Democrats, and then you've got these wild progressives. And Biden's trying to hold these progressives in the party at the expense of working with Republicans getting done. We have a 50-50 Senate. We nearly have a 50-50 House, and Joe Biden was narrowly elected by the Electoral College. This is a prescription for gridlock, or could be a prescription for bipartisan government. Now, the longer Joe tries to keep going down this path to keep the left happy, he's only pushing out Republicans, but moderate Democrats in the House and Senate, they got no place to go. And he's really putting those members at risk. Now, this is all going to play out in a big time here pretty soon with this so-called infrastructure bill. The left wants all kinds of things that none of us would ever describe as infrastructure. It's not, the votes are not there to do it. It's just a matter of time before they get abandoned and there's some kind of a bipartisan infrastructure bill, and the left will go crazy. So it's going to be interesting to watch here.
All right, and just two more quick questions. I always like to have questions from the students. Thank you, all the students who joined us today, high school and college, and maybe even middle school, I hope. I don't know. But Yvette from Sam Houston State University asked, what advice can you give to a young student trying to get involved in politics?
Well, get a good education, get a job, get involved in your community, learn something, and then you want to get involved, you can help a candidate, you can raise money, you can volunteer, you can be the candidate yourself. But the best members of Congress that I worked with over the years are people who came to Washington with some kind of a background. You know, whether it was their business background, their community background, they came with some experience and with some knowledge. We had a lot of members, though, that came right out of being a staffer in some member's office, and all they knew were politics, and politics. I think the best members are those who come with a broad background of knowledge, experience, that they can bring something to the Congress.
All right, a last question. Tyler asked, and a good way to finish, you touched upon some of these topics on your answer related to Biden. But Tyler asked, where do we go from here to get back to compromising and making meaningful strides in a bipartisan manner?
Well, in the back of my book, you'll see a list of Boehnerisms. Now, these are things that I would say quite often. My staff decided to call them Boehnerisms, and somebody actually made a list of them. One of them is, if you do the right things for the right reasons, the right things will probably happen. So don't worry about it. Another one is, it doesn't cost anything to be nice. Nothing. Another one was, you heard me say it earlier, you can disagree without being disagreeable. There's a whole long list of them, things that I would say probably more often than I should have. But this is not rocket science. We're human beings. At some point, the American people are going to get fed up with the media, get fed up with this far right, far left stuff, and demand that Congress begin to work together. And when the American people demand it, guess what? Their representatives will follow.
All right. Well, again, I just want to thank everyone so much for joining us today. Please join us next week on April 28th when we host the president of the World Economic Forum, Borge Brenda, on a discussion of the Davos Summit, the great economic reset for the world, and I suppose the world economy and the world years to come. And in 2 weeks, on May 5th, our program on Russia and Putin and options for the West with former senior CIA officer Andrea Kendall Taylor. And lastly, I want to say, Speaker Boehner, on behalf of the council and all my colleagues and all of our members and students and teachers, it's been an honor to host you. Thank you very much. And congratulations on the excellent book and on being #1 in the country. And good luck with the rest of it, and enjoy your retirement. And we're delighted to host you. And thank you so much for your time.
Ronan, it was a pleasure being with you and all of your guests. Have a great evening.
Okay. Thank you very much.